You are crouching in a frozen forest. The air burns the inside of your nose with every breath. Your fingers stopped feeling like fingers 20 minutes ago. It is negative 40 degrees. The snow is waist deep. And somewhere behind you, 3 imperial armies are following your tracks. You cannot build a shelter. You cannot light a fire. The smoke will give you away. You cannot stop moving, because the moment you do, the sweat in your clothes freezes against your skin. Most people would be dead before sunrise. The Honghuzi, the Redbeards of the Manchurian frontier, lived like this every winter. But they did not just survive, they built an invisible world under the snow. They fed themselves, moved faster than armies, and stayed hidden from 3 empires at once. The Manchurian frontier in the late 1800s was one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The Qing dynasty was falling apart. Russia, Japan, and China were all pushing into the same frozen territory, each one refusing to back down. Into that chaos came millions of refugees, driven north by famine with nothing left to lose. Some of them walked into the forest and never came back out, at least not in any way the empires could track. They formed mixed groups of Han Chinese, Manchus, Mongols, Koreans, and even displaced Russians. They became the Honghuzi, the Redbeards. The name is its own small mystery. Legend says they wore fake red beards. A more grounded explanation is that they plugged their gun muzzles with red tassels, and during a charge, they held those tassels between their teeth. From a distance, it looked like a bloody red beard rushing at you. Whatever the origin, the name stuck. For decades, these forest fighters used the frozen wilderness as their weapon. And what follows is the engineering behind how they pulled it off. Fire keeps you alive in the cold, but fire also gets you killed. In a frozen white forest, a normal campfire sends a smoke column straight up into the sky. A trained scout can spot it from 5 to 10 miles away. At night, the glow of open flames carries even further. For people being hunted by imperial patrols, lighting a fire the normal way is the same as sending a letter with your location written inside. So the Honghuzi did not light fires the normal way. They dug into the frozen ground. The shape was an L. One arm of the L held the fire pit, dug deep enough that no light escaped upward. The other arm was a tunnel, roughly 15 feet long, covered with flat stones and packed earth. The fire burned at the bottom of the pit. The smoke had only one place to go, through the tunnel. Here is what happened inside that tunnel. As the hot smoke moved through 15 feet of underground earth, the ground absorbed the heat. That warmed earth then radiated heat upward, slowly, steadily, into the sleeping area above. The bandits were sleeping on a heated floor. The same principle, it turns out, behind the kang beds used in the Forbidden City. Imperial palace technology and forest survival technology, built from completely different materials for completely different people, running on the exact same physics. The tunnel also filtered the smoke. Heavy soot particles settled out as the smoke cooled. By the time the exhaust reached the end of the tunnel, emerging under a dense thicket or a snowbank, most of the visible smoke was gone. What came out was a thin, low haze that blended into the natural winter mist. A normal campfire could be spotted from miles away. A low, cooled exhaust that seeps out under brush might not be noticed even within a few dozen yards. Picture a government scout moving through the trees. He stops. He catches a faint smell of wood smoke. He scans the tree line, nothing. No column, no glow. He moves on. 40 yards behind him, 30 bandits are sleeping on warm earth, completely invisible. Most people assume you need a chimney to run a fire safely. The Honghuzi proved otherwise. The earth is a better smoke filter than any chimney ever built. That same underground flue principle still heats the homes of roughly 175 million people in northern China today through the Kang system. The technology outlived the Redbeards by centuries. But the Flue had one limitation. It warmed the earth. It warmed the sleeping area. What it could not do was follow a man to bed. The moment a body lay down on cold ground, the earth started pulling heat back out, slow and steady, like a drain. They needed a way to bring warmth into the sleeping space without bringing fire inside. The answer was sitting in every riverbed within walking distance. Before we get to what they brought inside, we need to understand the structure they were sleeping in, because the shelter itself was doing most of the work. On the surface of a Manchurian forest in winter, wind chill can kill an exposed person in under an hour. A tent blocks wind, but holds almost no heat. It is also visible. The Honghuzi needed something warm, hidden and large enough to house groups for months at a time. They went underground. Their shelters were rectangular pit dwellings, dug 3 to 5 feet into the earth. The walls were lined with rough timber to hold the shape. The roof was heavy logs, layered with birch bark, sod, and packed snow on top. The entrance was a low, angled tunnel, just big enough to crawl through, positioned so wind could not drive straight inside. This design goes back much further than the Redbeards. Across northern China, archaeology shows the same rectangular pit construction. Timbered walls, storage pits dug into the floor. The same basic idea as the pit courtyard homes and Yaodong caves used on the Loess Plateau. The Honghuzi did not invent this type of shelter. They inherited it from thousands of years of northern survival knowledge and put it to use in a guerrilla context. Now here is the part that surprises most people. The ground feels cold, but a few feet below the surface, the earth holds a steady temperature year-round, much warmer than the winter air above. The Dian sat inside that stable zone. The earth walls were not just structural, they were insulation, absorbing body heat at night and releasing it slowly, keeping the interior temperature from swinging with the surface weather. And the snow on the roof was doing the heaviest lifting of all. Snow is roughly 90% trapped air. A thick layer of packed snow on a roof works the same way a heavy blanket does. It slows the movement of heat from the warm inside to the cold outside. The Bandits were not buried under snow. They were insulated by it. From the surface, a pit settlement like this was almost invisible. No walls, no roofline, no smoke. Just gentle mounds in the forest floor, indistinguishable from natural ground. Entire communities, some accounts suggest thousands of people across scattered camps, living 3 feet below the boots of the soldiers hunting them. But even inside a well-built Dian, one problem remained. The floor was still cold. Sleeping on cold ground pulls heat from the body all night, no matter how well the walls and roof are insulated. They needed a way to warm the floor without fire, without smoke, and without the risks that come with an open flame in a sealed underground space. The solution they found was one of the most practical pieces of engineering in this entire system. The problem with burning fire inside a small underground pit is not the flame. It is what the flame produces. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless. In a poorly ventilated space, it reaches lethal levels faster than most people expect. The Bandits knew this. They had seen it happen. So they kept the fire outside and used stone to carry the heat in. The principle is called thermal mass. Dense materials, stone, brick, clay, absorb heat slowly and release it slowly. A piece of granite heated to 100 degrees Celsius does not cool down in an hour. It radiates steady warmth for 8 to 10 hours. The specific heat capacity of granite sits at roughly 790 joules per kilogram, meaning it takes real energy to heat it up, and it gives that energy back just as gradually. The Honghuzi heated large river stones in the external fire during the day. When the stones were hot, they carried them into the Dian and wrapped them in felt or animal hide. The wrapping prevented burns and slowed the heat release, stretching the warmth through the night. Think of it this way: a campfire is a furnace. Enormous heat, fast fuel burn, cold the moment the wood runs out. A heated stone is a battery, slow to charge, slow to discharge, steady output for hours. The Bandits were not heating their sleeping space with fire. They were heating it with stored energy on a slow, controlled release. One bandit tucks a river stone wrapped in deer hide into the bottom of his sleeping area. It is warm through the hide. Over the next 8 hours, it radiates gentle heat. No flame, no smoke, no light. Just warmth, held in rock, released slowly until morning. The Kang beds of the Forbidden City worked on the same idea, underground flues warming massive brick platforms, the thermal mass of the brick holding heat through the night. The palace used brick, the forest used river stones. The materials were different, the physics was the same. The outside of the body was now handled. But there was a second problem, one happening inside the body itself. At -40 degrees, the human body burns through fuel at a rate most people never experience. And without the right food going in, the internal heat goes out. The human body runs on fuel. At a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius, a moderately active person burns around 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day. At -40 degrees, moving through deep snow, that number climbs to 5,500. And in extreme cases, past 7,500 calories a day. The body is not just moving, it is running a continuous internal heater, burning fuel around the clock just to hold core temperature at 37 degrees. Let that temperature drop even a few degrees and the body's chemistry starts to slow. Muscles weaken, thinking gets foggy. Shivering stops, which sounds like relief, but is actually a warning sign. Anyone who lived through a Manchurian winter had watched this happen to people. They knew exactly what it looked like, and they built their diet specifically to prevent it. The foundation of that diet was fat. Manchuria in the early 20th century was one of the world's great producers of soybeans. Those soybeans were processed into oils, flour and dense soy cakes. Soy cakes and animal fat made natural energy bricks, compact, calorie-dense, portable and stable in cold temperatures, the kind of food northern fighters and hunters relied on. They could be eaten raw on the move, dissolved into boiling water in camp, or stored in a pouch for days. The cold itself kept them from spoiling. Fat carries more than twice the calories of protein or carbohydrate, gram for gram. More importantly, digesting fat generates internal heat, a process called thermogenesis. Eating a block of fat before sleep was not just a meal. It was a deliberate act of stoking the body's furnace for the coldest hours of the night. When food ran out during a fast escape, the bandits turned to the trees. They stripped the outer bark from young pine or birch and peeled away the soft inner layer, the cambium. Low in nutrients, but it provided enough fibre and carbohydrate to keep the body's chemistry from stalling until the next proper food source. Not a meal, a bridge. Everything most people associate with unhealthy eating, animal fat, dense calories, rendered tallow, was, in the frozen forest, the most important thing a person could consume. The body does not care about dietary philosophy at -40 degrees. It cares about fuel, and fat was the highest output fuel available. They were now warm from the outside and fueled from the inside, but there was still a problem that shelter and food could not solve. They had to move. And in 4 feet of powder snow, movement on foot is exhausting. Exhaustion leads to sweating. Sweat freezes in clothing, and frozen wet clothing kills faster than the cold air alone. They needed a way to cover ground quickly, without burning through the calories keeping them alive. The solution was older than any empire hunting them. Moving through deep snow on foot is one of the most draining things a human body can do. Every step means lifting the foot clear of the snow, driving it forward and pulling it free again, against resistance in every direction with every stride. An army in waist-deep powder is not an army. It is a slow, exhausted line of people burning through their energy reserves with nothing to show for it. The Honghuzi solved this with a technology at least 10,000 years old. Their skis were made of birchwood, long flat planks that spread the wearer's weight across a larger surface, keeping the foot from sinking. But the wood was not the engineering. The engineering was on the underside, where the wood was covered with horse, reindeer or seal skin, hair left intact, aligned to point toward the back of the ski. That hair alignment was the mechanism. Moving forward, the hairs lay flat against the snow and the ski glided smoothly. Pushing backward to propel forward or climb a slope, the hairs stood up and gripped the snow, preventing any backward slide, a one-way ratchet built entirely from animal biology. Horsehair has a friction coefficient of roughly 0.18 in the glide direction and 0.35 against it, nearly double the grip when needed. That difference let the bandits climb slopes without slipping and descend them with control. This technology did not start with the Honghuzi. Fur-bottom skis trace back to the Altai mountain region of northwestern China, with evidence going back at least 10,000 years. The Redbeards inherited a mobility system that predates written history and adapted it to the Manchurian forest. An imperial force of 1,000 soldiers struggling through waist-deep snow at maybe a mile an hour. 5 Honghuzi on horse-skin gliders moving at 10 miles an hour over the snow crust, barely working. By the time the soldiers reached the spot where the bandits had been seen, the tracks had already disappeared into the tree line. Most people assume skiing came from Scandinavia. The archaeological record tells a different story. The Altai mountains of northwestern China hold some of the oldest evidence of ski use on Earth. The birch and fir glider was not a European invention that reached Asia. It went the other direction. Speed was now solved. But moving through snow, even on skis, meant constant contact with moisture. And in negative 40-degree air, wet clothing does not just make you uncomfortable. The leather stiffens, the insulation collapses. Body heat escapes in minutes. They needed clothing that worked like a sealed system, holding heat in and keeping moisture out at the same time. And the way they wore their fur was the opposite of what most people would expect. Most people, handed a fur coat, would wear it hair out. It looks right. It feels right. In moderate cold, it works well enough. At negative 40 degrees, it is the wrong choice. The Honghuzi wore their fur the other way around. To understand why, you need to understand what fur actually does. The fur fibers themselves are not the insulation. They are the structure that holds the insulation in place. The actual insulation is the air trapped between the fibers, still stagnant air that the body heats and the fur keeps from moving. Moving air carries heat away. Still air holds it. The entire job of fur is to keep that air still, close to the skin. When fur is worn hair out, wind hits the outer surface and drives into the fiber structure, pushing the trapped air out and carrying the warmth away. The leather against the skin provides almost nothing on its own. The system leaks. When fur is worn hair in, the fibers point toward the body. They trap a layer of still air directly against the skin. The body heats that air. The leather on the outside, smooth and relatively windproof, acts as a shell, blocking wind from reaching the fiber layer beneath. The system holds. The Honghuzi used 2 layers. The inner layer was worn fur in, sheepskin or wolfskin, with the hair against the body, creating a warm pocket of air at skin level. The outer layer was worn fur out, horsehide with the hair facing outward, shedding snow and rain the way a thatched roof sheds water, keeping the leather beneath from getting soaked. A waterlogged leather garment in wet spring snow could double in weight and lose most of its insulating value. The outer layer prevented that. Sheepskin worn fur in can keep a human warm in brutal cold, and a rough horsehide shell outside turns the whole outfit into a weatherproof capsule that holds a survivable temperature against the skin regardless of what is happening outside. Beneath fur layers, people in North China often used ramie, a plant fiber also called China grass. Ramie resists bacteria and mold naturally. For people living in damp underground pits for months at a time, skin infections were a real threat. The ramie layer was not about comfort, it was about staying functional. 2 men, same forest, same storm, same temperature. One wears his fur coat hair out. Wind cuts through the leather and strips the warmth from the fiber layer beneath. Within an hour, he is shivering. Within 3, he is in serious trouble. The other wears his fur reversed, hair against the skin, leather facing the wind. The wind hits a smooth surface and slides off. A pocket of warm air sits undisturbed against his body. Same coat, same fur. One lives, one does not. They were now warm, sheltered, fed, and fast. But there was one final enemy that none of this could stop, and it was working from the inside. When the body senses extreme cold, it pulls blood away from the fingers and toes to protect the vital organs. The hands go numb, the feet go numb, and if that process runs long enough, the tissue starts to die. The Honghuzi had one last tool, a chemical one, and it came with a warning the most experienced among them took seriously. Frostbite does not announce itself loudly. It starts as a tingle in the fingertips, a numbness in the toes that almost feels like relief from the pain of the cold. By the time the skin turns white and waxy, the tissue is already in trouble. Without treatment, it progresses to tissue death. In the Manchurian forest, far from any medical care, that meant amputation at best, infection at worst. The body's decision to cut blood flow to the extremities is not a mistake. It is a calculated trade. Sacrifice the fingers to protect the heart, but a bandit who cannot grip a weapon, dig a fire pit or hold a ski pole is not going to last long. Losing the use of his hands was not an option. The Honghuzi used two chemical tools to fight this, together in careful amounts. The first was capsaicin, the active compound in red chili peppers. They parboiled meat in water infused with dried red pepper pods, what some historical accounts call pepper water. Capsaicin binds to the body's heat-sensing nerve receptor, the same ones that respond to actual heat. The body reads the signal as warmth and responds by opening blood vessels in the extremities, pushing warm blood back into the fingers and toes. It did not raise core temperature, it redirected blood flow, the opposite of what the cold was doing. The second tool was high-proof grain alcohol, fire water. Alcohol also opens blood vessels and produces a fast, noticeable flush of warmth through the body. In small, controlled amounts, during intense physical activity in the cold, it could buy time when the fingers were going dangerously numb. But here is where it gets complicated. Alcohol opens blood vessels everywhere, including at the skin surface, where warm blood is then exposed to cold air and radiates heat outward. The same mechanism that warms the fingers also accelerates the loss of core heat. A person who drinks heavily in extreme cold feels warm. They are not warm. Their core temperature is dropping while their skin flushes red. It is one of the more dangerous illusions the cold produces. The most experienced Honghuzi treated fire water the way a surgeon treats a scalpel, useful in the right hands, in the right amount, for a specific purpose. Veterans warned recruits about drinking invitations from strangers. Infiltrating a bandit group often started with a shared cup. The target drank, felt warm, lowered his guard, and became vulnerable to both the enemy and the cold at the same time. The cup that felt like hospitality was sometimes a weapon. A bandit has been moving through the forest for hours. His fingers are going numb through his fur gloves. He stops, pulls a small flask from inside his coat, and takes one careful sip of rice or grain spirits mixed with chili and ginger. He waits. Warmth spreads into his hands. He flexes his fingers. They respond. He caps the flask and moves on. Enough to open the vessels, not enough to open the floodgates. The Honghuzi did not outlast the Manchurian winter by being tougher than the cold. They outlasted it by building a system, one where each layer solved the problem the previous one left behind. The underground fire warmed the earth without giving away their position. The earth pit held that warmth through the night. The river stone carried heat into the sleeping space without smoke or flame. The fat brick kept the body's internal furnace burning. The horse skin glider turned deep snow from a barrier into an advantage. The reversed fur sealed warmth against the skin. And the careful, measured use of capsaicin and firewater kept blood moving to the extremities when everything else was trying to shut them down. 7 pieces of practical engineering, built from what the forest provided, refined over decades of survival against 3 empires. And if this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe to Silk Road Diaries, because this is what we do here every week.